Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Art of Creation Homestead. My name is Jason. We're out here. We've been planting our garden, and we got some things planted in our grow bags and some raised beds over here. And we planted some stuff in our garden, but kind of want to go over something today. Somebody's asked us about this in the past. Is basically our approach to fertilizing everything that we grow as we walk through this garden. Our first approach, okay, to fertilizing and growing our food is just building soil. And then right here, you can just kind of look at this. This is the soil we've been working on building, right? It's just a good, you can see some pine shavings in there from our chicken bedding that hasn't completely broke down yet. They will break down. You can just see just a nice soil, good dark brown soil. So that's really our first thing we focus on doing is a good loose, rich, well-draining soil. And that encompasses everything in our ground. Now, obviously, we plant in raised beds and grow bags and green stalks as well. We have a different approach for building soil in those things. We do try to treat them as much like growing in the actual ground as we can, even though it's not the same, because there's always going to be an element of bagged soil to that growing medium, right? So there's going to be some compost that we've done ourselves with our chicken bedding and some vegetable scraps and whatnot, but then there's also bagged soil. So for that, we use worm castings. So we'll buy worm castings from New Country Organics, where we also buy our feed from, and we'll order them from our dealer. Yeah, that's right. We got a worm castings dealer, y'all. So again, we use worm castings for building soil in our containers and our raised beds and things like that. So now, as for fertilizing each individual vegetable, so we plant 29 tomato plants in the ground and quite a few in grow bags, a bunch of peppers in the ground and some more in grow bags. So we kind of handle those similarly because of what they are, but like each individual vegetable. So like all the tomatoes are handled one specific way, peppers are handled another way. So we do use organic fertilizers for those things, and we treat them each a little differently. We use blood meal and bone meal, and then that bag there is kelp meal. The blood meal is for nitrogen, the bone meal is for phosphorus, and then the kelp meal is for potassium. The kelp meal we buy from New Country as well. It's not cheap, but New Country is the cheapest place to buy a good sized bag of it. And then, like I said, the blood meal and bone meal, we get larger bags just from Amazon, no big deal. And so in every place that we talk about, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, I'm talking about those three individual things. And also, if I'm talking about using a general fertilizer, I'm talking about using this bag right here. This bag of this basic fertilizer we get from New Country. Again, just a 543. Very, very, very basic fertilizer that's good for some light feeders, basically. Now, so that way, just remember those as we go through this video. That way we don't have to keep referencing each individual thing every time we talk about it. But these potatoes grow right here in these grow bags, and for potatoes, potatoes need like twice as much phosphorus and potassium as they do nitrogen. They do need nitrogen, that's okay, but we'll do twice as much phosphorus and potassium as we do nitrogen for the potatoes, simply because potatoes are a root crop and they're also a carbohydrate. So phosphorus and potassium help to build roots and transfer carbohydrates from the soil to the plant, and so therefore those things aid in producing a better potato, larger potato. I believe a more flavorful potato, okay, honestly, and just a better product overall. And so you do need nitrogen to help grow the plant, but don't need too much. I think typically the general rule they'll tell you is like 5-10-10. Season with your heart. Okay, honestly, Angela will season with her heart when she cooks. We kind of take a similar approach to seasoning the soil or seasoning the plants or to fertilizing, but don't go overboard, but just understand a basic general idea. But do remember that after your plants have gotten taller and gotten bigger and more established, it takes 90 days essentially to grow most of these varieties of potatoes. So halfway through those 90 days, so 45 days into this, so we'll say 6 weeks into it, right? Come back and fertilize again with bone meal and kelp meal. Okay, they're going to need it. Do that with potatoes and sweet potatoes. Now I'm going to show you dipping out the fertilizer for one tomato plant. We've planted 28 other tomatoes. We've saved one right here for this purpose alone. And I'll show you kind of how we kind of season with our heart as we fertilize these tomatoes. One good thing is you can read the back of the bag, and they'll tell you, directions for broad feeding or for trees and shrubs and whatnot. And then here I'll tell you, okay, total nitrogen, it's 12% nitrogen. Or it might even say individual plants, half tablespoon per plant. This is kind of where you start seasoning with your heart, right? I'm just gonna take this old tablespoon measure, okay? It's an old one. Don't use the one in your kitchen that you're gonna use for food, right? I shouldn't have to tell you this, but just in case. Dip out a rough tablespoon and sift it along like this. And maybe leave a little bit because I got a full tablespoon. Didn't need a full one. Go on. Do be careful when feeding your plants with blood meal, especially. Blood meal is very, very hot. So if you get too much of it up on like the stems of your plants, you may burn your plants, okay? That's just, I've never done that personally. Doesn't mean you can't. All right, so just be cautious and maybe get it away from the stems of your plant a little bit if you're fertilizing the soil around an existing plant. About a little bit of bone meal. Now you see, bone meal is good for tomato plants. They really need it. Okay, so I do a heaping tablespoon. You're not going to hurt your tomato plant by putting a little too much bone meal in there. Dust it in there. The only time that's going to vary with tomato plants for us is when you're planting a pasting tomato, an Amish paste, aroma, something of that nature that's a pasting style tomato, San Marzano style, whatever it may be. I would do 2 tablespoons for each plant of those because they need more phosphorus. They need more phosphorus and calcium. Okay, bone meal's also got calcium in it, and so this helps get this calcium to your tomato because that helps fight blossom end rot, which those pasting tomatoes are very prone to. And then same with kelp. Take that and dust it in there. Now I truly don't know how rich in potassium that kelp meal is. I just know that kelp meal is good for potassium. So season with your heart. If you got good soil already, that really helps to just be able to season with your heart, okay? And so then I just mix all this in there, just like this, right? Plant the plant, move along. We'll do something similar for peppers, okay? And we won't have to go through the whole process of peppers. Do something similar with peppers, maybe a little more bone meal, or a little more blood meal, a little less bone meal, something like that. And we'll also use Epsom salt for the peppers, okay, because it's got magnesium, and magnesium is good for blossom set. If you watch your peppers and you kind of find that some of the blossoms are coming out and just dying off, maybe you need some magnesium, honestly. So we'll just get a good couple of dashes of Epsom salt around the peppers and make sure to get a little magnesium into the soil. That'll help set those blossoms. This whole row here along this trellis is going to be done with beans, green beans. Green beans are a light feeder, nothing crazy. We're going to use that in general fertilizer. Just scatter, honestly. Just a good healthy dose. That's all it's going to really need. We'll do the same in our raised beds for the green beans that are growing there. We'll do the same for any dry beans that grow. Don't sweat it with the beans, just give them some food. They'll be all right. On these 2 trellises right here, cucumbers are going to be planted here maybe later or maybe tomorrow. But honestly, what we're going to do with the cucumbers is cucumbers will have a tendency to feed a little heavy. We're going to put some in general fertilizer on them, but then we're also going to mix in some blood meal for each one of those because they do tend to just soak up the feed, soak up nitrogen. That's what they do. They're very green, honestly. And so make sure they got enough to feed on for a little while. What happens is if your soil's good and then and you know you didn't plant your cucumbers too close, you know you've watered them well, everything's done right, and you feel like maybe too early in the season, their leaves are yellowing, the cucumbers are getting shorter and knobbier. Honestly, they've sucked that soil dry. That's exactly what's happened. They've taken every bit of nutrition for themselves out of that soil, and they're hungry. And at that point, you're not going to recover. You might as well just pull them up and start over. So that's what happens with cucumbers far too often. We will take a similar approach with zucchini and yellow squash. Okay, they're going to be in raised beds up here, so they're going to have some worm castings in the soil as well. That will help. But we're going to take a similar approach to that, probably exactly the same approach, honestly, to those, because they're all heavy feeders or in similar families, which is a heavy feeding family. They will pull up every bit of nitrogen out of the soil and every bit of nutrients out of the soil, and that's what happens. And that's why a lot of times the plants poop out a little early. Again, with those, is that they've taken everything they can out of the soil and there's nothing left. Now right here is where we plant corn. We do plant sweet corn and popcorn, okay? Sweet corn, I'm gonna say, is the bane of my existence. I love to eat it. I would love to be able to grow some really good sweet corn. I tend to, honestly, we have so many issues with it. So this year we're planting our sweet corn a little differently. We started the seeds so we can have started plants to put in the ground. And the next thing is, it is one of the heaviest feeders you're gonna find, if not the heaviest, okay? It needs everything, all right? A bunch of nitrogen, and honestly, it needs a bunch of nitrogen just to grow the stalks. Just to grow the stalks, it needs a bunch of nitrogen. I don't know if you can feed it too much, to be honest with you. So we're gonna hammer home the blood meal. We're gonna hammer it. I'm not even trying to measure out necessarily. I'm not trying to figure out how much it's supposed to need for whatever. I don't care. I'm gonna give it all it can take, right? Everything we can, I'm gonna do to it, because I'm desperate to grow some really good corn. It just never works out. So, so it does need a bunch of nitrogen. Plain and simple, it does. But also, it's a carbohydrate. So it's gonna need to produce the sweet kernels, and a lot of kernels, it's gonna need phosphorus and potassium as well. And it's gonna need a bunch of that. So that's corn. Truly, corn is probably not the most financially efficient crop to grow. If you're looking to grow organic corn, especially. But also, go buy organic corn. You're not gonna find it. So if you wanna do it yourself and you want organic corn, you're probably gonna have to do it yourself. And honestly, I'm just stubborn enough to keep trying it anyways. I don't care. So just hammer home that fertilizer. Don't measure, don't worry about it. Do whatever you can stinking do to get fertilizer to that corn. And also, do it again about 6 weeks later. Be honest, it needs it all. Maybe in a month, maybe even a month later. Do it again a month later. Now, when we plant beets, beets are gonna be similar because they're in a raised bed. We're gonna put a bunch of worm castings in that because it's in a raised bed. We're building soil there. But also, it's a root crop. You gotta remember, it's a root crop. We're gonna give it the in general fertilizer and probably a dash more of some bone meal and kelp meal. Doing the same here. These are carrots, and while we haven't finished thinning them all yet, we're gonna eventually fertilize them with some bone meal and some kelp meal because it's a root that is also sweet. Anything that's a root crop, remember, phosphorus and potassium. That's a really good way to think of it, is that phosphorus and potassium produce carbohydrates and roots. They produce really good roots and good carbohydrates, and that's what you're growing with every root crop. So again, you're gonna also do the same with what? Sweet potatoes. We haven't planted our sweet potatoes yet, but you'll take the same approach to that, okay? But sweet potatoes are a heavier feeder and might be able to handle a dash more nitrogen, just being real with you. And I've covered all the bases, and I hope I haven't been too long. So thank you guys so much for watching. I do appreciate it. My name is Jason. This is Art of Creation Homestead. We love y'all. God bless you and goodbye.